Low ball. Keep up with Scottish football with your host, John Turner.
So in this week's episode of the Low Ball Show, I'm joined by a man who has played with teams such as Clevedon Town, Halifax Town, West Brom, Coventry City, Bradford City, Gillingham, Celtic, Preston North End, Hereford United, Hawke's Bay United, Wellington Phoenix, and is currently goalkeeping coach of the New Zealand international team is Jonathan Gould. Jonathan, thanks for joining us today.
Good evening, John. Thanks for the invite.
One of the first questions that I had for you is, obviously, before anybody comes on, I always like to try and do a wee bit of research and looking back. And I read that in your early days, you actually played in defence for quite a while.
Yeah. I didn't actually migrate to being a goalkeeper until I think I was just 19. So I probably wanted to follow in my father's footsteps, saw myself as a striker. Didn't quite have the pace, had an eye for goal, John, but not quite the pace. And then, yeah, most of my early career was spent at centre back or right back. And it wasn't till I think I was working in the bank in London, in Wandsworth at the time, and didn't really want to spend the rest of my time working in a bank. Not that there's anything wrong with that profession. There's plenty of money to be made in the bank nowadays. And my dad just said, the only chance you've got of being a professional footballer is in goal. So I made the change at 19.
And just to touch on your dad as well, I mean, obviously a massive name in the game and what he has achieved. What was that like growing up for yourself?
Oh yeah, we were quite nomadic because as a centre forward, Dad was always in demand, and so he was always on the move. When I was born, he was playing for Arsenal, which was huge in those days. Still is now. So I never really got to see him. The first time I recollected it was really probably was going to watch him when he played for Wolves. And I was probably around 4 or 5 then. But I can remember being in around the dressing room and getting to know characters. There's a guy called John Richards, Stevie Kindon, Kenny Hibbett. There was some sort of big names of the 70s era then. And then the biggest recollection I have was when Dad played for West Ham United. They got to the FA Cup final in '75. He was an unused substitute. In those days, there was only one substitute. So not to get on the field of play when there was only one was quite unlucky for Dad. But he still got his winner's medal. And I can remember running around Wembley in 1975 as if I was a player. And I can remember being on the open top bus with them going through London at the time on the Sunday and having the FA Cup even at that age. It's an indelible mark, really, John. And I think that's when you realise you're actually quite lucky as well to be in those situations, really.
And was that, obviously having those situations and those moments with your dad, was that really something that you looked at and thought, I would love to have this, this moment yourself in a career?
Yeah, yes, it was. That's all I wanted to do. That's all I did. I used to go out in the we had a reasonably sized garden, and that's all I used to do. I used to play football in the back garden. If I wasn't in the back garden, I was down at a place called the Nautical School in Portishead, and it was where the naughty boys went. I think they were called Borst. We used to find the football pitch down on the bottom part of the Nautical School as it was, and we used to play for hours. We used to go out first thing in the morning, and we used to come back when it was dark. And Mum never used to have to worry where we were because she knew we were playing soccer, and that's it was I was probably the 10,000 hours, but it was informal learning. And Dad never really wanted me to get involved in actual coaching until it became a social thing then as well, my friends, and that was when I was allowed to really join a club, which is probably I was probably about 8 or 9 when I joined Portishead.
And then when you started, you made the transition, as we kind of briefly touched on, into goalkeeping. Was that when you really felt like you found your path in football?
I knew that was a path I wanted to follow, but I also knew there was a huge amount of work in between that, and being such a late starter, I had good hand-eye coordination. I was a I was a reasonable footballer technically with the ball at my feet, so that helped me. But there was lots of work to do, and I wrote to 92 football league clubs on a typewriter, John, in those days, and sent the letters to every single club in the league. And I had 32 responses. 30 were no, and 2 were yes. And the 2 that were yes, one was Arsenal, and one was Derby, and the goalkeeper at the time at Derby was Peter Shilton. And so I went on trial to Derby. That was my first real initiation into professional football as a player.
And what's a trial like? So when you were invited off for a trial?
It's quite different for me because they kind of said Arthur Cox was the manager and he didn't really put a time on it. And there was a guy called Roy McFarlane as well. They didn't put a time on it at all. They just kind of let me be, to be honest. And I was not on trial for 9 months, I think, before they realised I was still in the building and it was time for me to leave. But in that time, I had fantastic experience with watching Peter work, and then I went on loan to Basildon United, and did some hard yards, but it was fantastic 9 months to learn from who was at the time one of the best in the world.
Yeah, and just to say with the trial and things and it being 9 months,
Yeah.
did you feel like it was always going to come to an end at some point?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I knew they weren't going to sign me. I just think Arthur was kind enough to give me that time, and I remember walking in his office, and he said, "Look, there was a couple of things that he said to me. He said one of them was my work ethic. The other one was I came and caught a couple of crosses, and he says, "Oh, I won't forget the way you came." He says, "I think you'll make it in your life." He says, "But it just won't be here. You now need to go and find your way by playing football, on a regular basis."
And after, obviously, you're saying about the work you'd put in with writing to clubs and using the old typewriters,
Yeah.
and doing that to
Yeah.
then be in that position, how did
Yeah.
you feel your next move was going to be?
I've never actually, John, planned anything meticulously. So you kind of fall into things. I then went back to Bristol, Portishead again, where mum and dad were. And I went to Clevedon Town. Decided that was probably my next step, and in between that time, ended up in New Zealand for 9 months, playing football out there. In 1989, I went out to play for a team called Napier City Rovers, and again, we won the National League out there, but I didn't finish the season as the goalkeeper. I finished the season as the centre back. So even though I thought I was making forward steps, I was probably still making backwards ones. So then when I came back and went to Clevedon Town as a goalkeeper, I think I played 11 games and kept something like 6 clean sheets, and then went on trial again to Halifax, and quite a famous Scot dad, who was a former teammate at Wolves, as I mentioned earlier. And yeah, within 2 weeks they signed me on a pro contract for 2 years. So yeah, it was a really strange pathway, John, to be honest.
And obviously from Halifax, from being there and then, making the appearances that you did over the time that you were there, and then moving on to teams such as like Coventry City and
Yeah.
Bradford City, was that just again
Yeah.
the kind of times and requirements, or was that you feeling like it was time to move on?
Yeah, yeah, no, I think Hereford was like my apprenticeship because I hadn't served one properly at a football club as what you'd see nowadays. I think, to play, I think it was 30 plus games at Halifax, and we were in the bottom of the league. but it was a great little club. That's where you kind of do your apprenticeship, and you learn certain things around yourself. You learn certain things around the game. I mean, Halifax, as I said, we weren't a great team, so I always had plenty to do. Um, and then again, those little stepping stones. I had seven, even at Coventry. I made my Premier League debut against Liverpool. And winning 5-1. That was an incredible day. But you still then I've got a kind of feeling that as a goalkeeper, you go games 1 to 3 is run on adrenaline. If you get 3 to 7 and you're trying to find some consistency, 7 to 12, you want to start winning a couple of games for your team. And by the time you get to 15, if you've made 15 consecutive games, you really should be seeing the season out. And I don't think I really got that, ironically enough, until I went to Celtic.
And obviously, kind of talking on Celtic now, when you
Yeah.
arrived, what was that kind of move like? How did that come about?
It was crazy, craziest 24 hours you've ever had, right? Um, the day before, I spoke to a guy called Ronnie Moore. I'd been told I could have a free transfer, and I spoke to Ronnie Moore. Ronnie Moore was at the time was manager at Scarborough, and funny enough, he's just got a job as chief scout at Hartlepool today. I think I read about it, and I said, Ronnie, look, I'm on my way out at Bradford. Chris Kamara is the manager then, who I get on very well with now, but he didn't fancy me. I'd obviously already played Premier League football, and I said to Ronnie, I'm available. And I need a goalkeeper, and he said, no, we don't really want you. That's basically what he said. And I said, okay, well, if you change your mind, give me a call. The next morning, I got a phone call from an agent in Scotland called Murdo Mackay, and he rang me and he said, oh, Celtic are after a goalkeeper. Would you be interested in that kind of move? And it was a silly question to ask anyway. He said, look, I'll put your name in and let's see what happens. Anyway, so I put the phone down, and I don't know, intuition or what. I rang my dad. I said, Dad, do you know anybody at Celtic? And he said, yeah, I know Jock Brown, who was the general manager. So I said, can you just give Jock a ring and just make sure I am in there? So Dad rang Jock, and I then took my phone. I had a Sony Muzbar at the time. That's what the phones were called, John, and, mobile ones. And I went out training. I was training with the third team at Bradford. I asked the coach, Chris Hutchins, if I could take my phone with me, and he thought that was a strange request. Anyway, the Muzbar rang in my pocket as I was running around the training ground, and it was Jock Brown. And his question was, can you deal with an Old Firm game? And I said, well, I've played in the Premier League. I think I can deal with an Old Firm game. Yeah, and he said, right, okay, get in your car and come up and sign for us this afternoon. So I drove up, met Murdo, McLeod, met Vim. I knew Murdo McLeod previously from my involvement in the Scotland squad, and then and signed my contract. And after I'd signed the contract, I said to Jock, I said, oh, did my agent have anything to do with this? And he actually said, no, nothing to do with it. He actually put Brian Gunn in before he didn't mention your name whatsoever. So I'm just so glad I rang up my dad and made him have that connection with Jock. Otherwise, it would never have happened, and I may well have been at Scarborough the following week,
And
not Celtic.
and then obviously, you know, signing with Celtic, did you have any kind of expectations on the kind of now being asked the question like, will you be able to play in an Old Firm game, and the kind of fan engagement and things? Did you have any expectation beforehand?
Well, when I went to New Zealand, I went with a Scottish lad called Brian McAllister, and we roomed together. And he was a mad Celtic supporter. So for 9 months, he used to wake up every single morning and listen to the BBC World Service to listen out for the Celtic results. So I had quite an intimate knowledge of how passionate Celtic supporters were from sort of 14,000 miles away. But I don't think I really understood what it was all about until I walked in the door. And I think the lucky thing was one of the early games that I had was a friendly against Roma. And that's a friendly, and it was played in front of a full house, and we won 1-0, and so that was my first experience. So to get that opportunity within the week of arriving, I think that gave me an inkling as to what I was going to expect over the next 6 years.
And obviously, because you know a large part of your career being spent at Celtic, in games, you know, and I'm sure many will agree, when you're playing at a club, you know, you're playing at one of either Rangers or Celtic, and there's many games that you can play in where I'm sure like there's maybe not as much work for a goalkeeper to do as what there can be in other games. How, in that atmosphere at that time, are you able to kind of keep your concentration and keep your head in being ready?
Yeah, it's something probably been one of my strengths is concentration anyway. But I had a couple of markers, let's call them. So, you know, obviously we were obviously in the ascendancy in a lot of the games that we played. We you know, the balls at the other end of the pitch, and so when I had something whereby whenever the ball went out for a corner, for us, I'd go back into my net, have a drink, walk to the penalty spot, and then just say, right, I'm going to kick in. Concentration kicks in now, because that was probably when we were at our most vulnerable, because we were always pressing with lots of players. The counter attack was something that I always had to be ready for, and that was one of the ways that that I prepared myself, and that aspect of concentration that's required at that level. I think also what really helped me at Celtic was I had an amazing mentor called Pete Latchford for the first year. He was our goalkeeping coach, and he knew what it took to be a Celtic goalkeeper. He played for the club, you know, hundreds of times, and he kind of had a sixth sense as to how the game was going to pan out. And I would have said 98% of the time he was spot on. So I'd already had a relay of the opposition, and when and where I might be called upon. So I think that first year to have him probably made me for that first year because of his experience.
And with that, and once you kind of came in and you were settled in regards to, you know, the players, the staff, the fans, what was the expectations like to kind of have that on a consistent basis? Because obviously I think we know that, you know, Celtic fans as well as Rangers fans are very expectant of results and winning, but to have that, especially being the goalkeeper, when you're the kind of last line of defence, if you like.
Yeah, it was something that you have to come to terms with, and you have to adjust to. And that it did, you know, no word of lie, put an extra amount of pressure on me as a goalkeeper and as a person, knowing that we had to basically win every week, especially that first season. You know, I think what it meant was, like I talk about it quite often to young goalkeepers, is that my routine through the week, you know, by Thursday, I obviously wanted to work a certain way, and Pete and my other goalie coaches allowed me to do that. I wanted to make sure technically I was in a good space, but also mentally, I didn't want a lot of people around me. I had a young family at the time, and I used to go to the gym in the evenings, bath times, so that I didn't really have, I don't know, that cluster around me. I didn't want to deal with that sort of stuff, which is not nice, because you live in a family life, and you know, there's expectations there as well, but there was also a massive expectation on performance, on the basis that every Saturday and every Tuesday or Wednesday, whether it was in Europe, whether it was in the league or the cups, you had to be ready to perform, because if you didn't, it could be costly, especially as a goalkeeper.
And with, you know, you talking about the kind of life and the lifestyle, did it become apparent very quickly, you know, being in Scotland? One, the weather's always ridiculously bad.
It's not
And
changed either.
well, I'm looking outside to a pouring down, pouring
Yeah,
down day. But I assume you must have been recognised a lot going out and about.
yeah,
How was that to deal with?
yeah. There was a couple of scary moments. I remember going over to Toys R Us, and it was just down the road from Ibrox, and we were Christmas shopping basically, and I had the two kids and my wife with me, and I remember a supporter coming up to me at the till and verbally abusing me and telling me to go and shop on the other effing side of town. And in an instance, I dropped everything that I had, took the kids because you felt there was an element of danger. Get in the car and left and went home. And there were a couple of other occasions, well, quite a number of other occasions where incidences like that had an impact. Remember one, it was the first season I was there, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I had my mum and dad staying with us as well. And 2 o'clock, we were due to play Hearts on the Sunday. I think Rangers may have dropped points on the Saturday. And 2 o'clock in the morning, I had 6 police cars outside my house. I had police jumping over my fence, banging on the door, and it had been reported that there'd been a break-in at my house. I think I answered the door in some Daffy Duck boxer shorts, quite as if to say, there's no burglars going around my house at the moment. He said, well, we'd had a report, and yeah, they were the sort of things. And we used to get them as a group of players as well. I remember being in Cameron House, and more often than not, when we used to stay there for nights before games, the alarm would go off because they knew we'd be in there. We'd be standing outside, shivering our nuts off, outside Cameron House most Sunday mornings when we stayed there.
And to look at, probably easier to look back, but more so at the time, was it difficult to, with having that kind of things and the effect it can have, to then want to continue to remain playing, when the environment and situations can result in that?
Um, I can remember, I'm talking quite frankly, I can remember one incident where I think we were having quite a rough time under John Barnes as a team and as a club, and I think we were due to play Dundee at home, and it was coming, it was getting on top of me, to be honest. And as a group of players, we weren't happy in the dressing room with the way certain things were going. I can remember driving through Glasgow and going under the tunnel, over the river, but under the tunnel, and just thinking, well, if I crash my car lightly at this point without hurting myself, I wouldn't have to play tonight. That was how it got to me on one occasion, and obviously you don't, and you drive through and you get to the ground, you beat Dundee 1-0, I think it was, and you drive back through that same tunnel that night, and you go, well, why was I thinking that way? It's a game of football, but that was the level of intensity and scrutiny that you have to cope with. And I probably on that moment, I didn't cope with it, but I coped with it in the game. You get to the game, and those feelings disappear because you've got a job to do. And I suppose that's when the adrenaline kicks in as well, John.
And with, as you said, obviously with the time kind of under John Barnes and the kind of difficulties
Yeah.
that there were at the time, and just kind of touching on it, what was the atmosphere like amongst the players?
We were quite a strong group, and you'd like to think most managers would want a strong group. We had a core that obviously been through good times with Vim, and despite not winning anything under Joseph, we enjoyed our work, even though we had a pretty poor season. When John came in, there was probably an element of a lack of experience. And I'm looking back on it now. We were probably quite an overpowering group of players. And yeah, for his first job, I think if John looks back, he probably wished he'd have cut his teeth at a couple of other jobs before he took that one, because it was huge. And again, going back to that scrutiny and the pressure we were under, it's for a manager to go in as his first club and be expected to win the league, the cup, basically win the treble, that's tough for your first one.
Yeah.
So I think yeah, that it was probably a good thing that the players were strong in the end. The change obviously got made, and Kenny came in and took over for 5 or 6 months and steadied the ship. Um, and then we all know who arrived after that.
And just to kind of touch on as well with the times that were there, because I know obviously you'd spoke about a few of the instances that probably weren't nice to look back on and having interactions, but there must have been many kind of good ones, I assume, when things are going well and you're going out and about, and a lot of kind of supporters and fans want to come up.
Yeah, that's obviously the other side to it. And now stopping Rangers win 10 that one year, but you're revered from that moment. Um, I still watch the video now. There was a video of the game against St Johnstone, which was also almost done without commentary, and the camera spends most of its time on the supporters, and when you see the fact that they're going through probably worse emotions than we are as players, because we're living it, we've got a way of expressing ourselves in that 92 3 minutes, whatever it might be. All the fans can do is support us, which they did amazingly, and they still do. They're incredible set of supporters, but fret as well a little bit and worry about the outcome of our game. Obviously against St Johnstone on that day it was amazing, and I think Rangers were getting beat by Dundee United 2-1 or beating Dundee United 2-1 at the time. So there was no room for error that day. But you're right. There are moments where you sort of wonder why you're under such scrutiny and why there's so much, and the word is hatred. I'm going to use that word. But at the same time, the adulation that you get from your own supporters and the loyalty. I watched the game yesterday, and you remain a supporter for the rest of your life. My whole family supports Celtic. It's remarkable.
And just to kind of finally touch on there with Celtic, because obviously you says about who came in after the kind of tough seasons. What's that like in the changing room when you hear who's going to be coming in, who's going to be joining? Is there a lot of questions like, have people worked under him before? Do we know what he's like?
Yeah, I had a bit of advice from one of his former players, and I won't name him, but because I knew this lad, and he said, whatever you do, he said, don't answer Martin back. He doesn't like it. So, and I was one of those guys that I would answer people back if I felt it was necessary. Still do, even at the age of 55, But yeah, there's always talk. There's always there's insecurity in players because you think, well, is he going to like me? Am I still going to be in the team? That he's obviously going to bring his own players in. Every manager, that's how you feel about every manager, unless they sign you and you're coming in the door. The minute they walk in the door, there's doubt around. It becomes that moment. It becomes quite a selfish place because you just worry about yourself. But then very quickly, and I think Martin was brilliant in his first meeting in the old players' bar he showed who the boss was, but he also showed that he was a leader, and by doing that in that first instance, that first meeting, it's a crucial one for head coaches. We trusted him implicitly straight away, and I think one of the iconic moments of Martin, I think, is him walking out at Parkhead in front of the supporters and him saying, "I'll do everything." I think it was something along the lines of, "I'll do everything I can to ensure success at this football club." And that meant there were going to be change of players. There was going to be maybe a style of play that he wanted, and that was us as players. That was our responsibility to adapt then, and we did it pretty well.
And then did you see the atmosphere kind of amongst the players and the feelings and the kind of fan interactions getting better?
Yeah. Yeah. He's he already came with a pedigree, Martin did, and he came with an aura about him. And I think the other thing was you knew he was a Celtic supporter. And that kind of probably brought his own pressure on him as well. But he also brought a fabulous backroom staff in. John Robertson had been in and around him and won European Cups with him. Stevie Walford. John was kind of the grey hair. John used to he used to just make himself visible around the changing room and around the physio room with Brian Scott. And you knew that he was going back and feeding stuff back into the manager, but you knew that everything was well placed. And you knew there was an intelligence about John. He knew a player, and he knew the game. And Stevie Walford was, he was what you call our session coach. So he had three of them that are all incredibly experienced in the roles that they were doing. And because of that, straight away the training becomes more focused. The way that the lads respond to the manager on a daily basis. And Martin had several different personalities. You'd walk into his office and you knew you were beaten before you walked in. You'd walk down the corridor and sometimes he wouldn't even speak to you. There was this big black cloud hanging over him. You'd be in another environment and he was the funniest man. And then you'd see him at work in the dressing room. And he was a master of motivation.
And I suppose then just to ask, over the time when Martin came in, do you have anything that would stand out to say a kind of favourite memory or something that you look back on?
Yeah, and it's a kind of reflection on him. So and it was 3 years into his reign as a manager, and I wasn't playing as much under him. There was one season I think where I was on the bench for nearly every game, and I may have played one game in the UEFA Cup in the league, and that was it. And we won the league, and I wasn't therefore eligible for a league winners medal. And we were in the circle at Parkhead as a whole group, and he was handing the medals out to all the lads because for some reason it hadn't been done previously at one of the games. And he had in the bag, and he just said, "I've got one more medal here," and he says, "And this is for a guy that's, he's been there for every single game. He's not complained. He's got on with his job." And Martin and the coaching staff had all clubbed together and bought me a winners medal, even though because I'd only played one game, you had to play 8. I wasn't entitled to it. And for me, that showed his empathy. It showed how much just being a squad player still meant, and especially at a club like Celtic.
And I mean, with that, I assume that was from your part very unexpected.
Yeah, no idea at all. No idea. And then because of that, you get confirmation that even though you want to play, that you've still got a role. And I've sort of something that's taken with me as a coach and made sure that players that aren't playing, you're better off being at a club that's successful and not playing than being at a club that's failing and playing. It's still far more enjoyable. And that's probably why I stayed at the club for the period of time that Martin kept me there. He dropped me basically. I think we'd gone 13 games unbeaten in the league that first season. He dropped me, but then gave me a 3.5-year contract because there was other elements of kind of what I brought to the dressing room, and he knew I was dependable when he needed me, and then therefore I knew what my job was.
And when it came time, when you were leaving Celtic, how was that?
This was as crazy as the day that I actually arrived at the club. We were on a midwinter break, and so we were always allowed to go and have a period of time away with our families. And I'd taken my wife and children out to La Manga to play a bit of golf with my son, even though he was only 7. And I remember the phone going again. It was on, and I was on one of the greens, and it was the manager. And he said, "Look, Gould," he said, "there's a club has come in for you. It's Preston." He said, "I can't guarantee that I'm going to be here at the end of the season," because I don't think he'd sorted his contract out. He said, "So I can't guarantee what your future is." He said, they want you to go and be first choice. I've said that you can go for nothing. You've been a good servant to this club. He says, and I know, and I was due a little bit of money at the end of my contract as a loyalty payment. And he said, you've been here 6 years, and I'll make sure that your loyalty payment's paid as well. He said, so all I want you to do is make a footballing decision. And I was third choice at the time, and for him to give me that opportunity and take all the other, we'll call it stuff, out of the way, and me to be able to make a footballing decision at the age of 35 was amazing. Again, that was just showing what he was about as a manager and as a person. And yeah, so I decided then, yeah, I've done 6 years. I've had an amazing time. It's time for me to go and play a bit of football. So I popped down to the Championship for a couple of years.
And how was that, from going from being at Celtic, the successes you had, but also you're saying at the kind of latter end when the games weren't as frequent for you, your roles were kind of held elsewhere, to then get down and be first choice?
But to be honest, from a playing perspective, it was amazing. And I played 50 odd games, I think, in the space of 18 months for Preston, and I loved playing, and it kind of it gave me a lift in respect of made me realise that I should be playing at this stage of my career. And but what it also taught me was I think immediately you leave the Goldfish Bowl and you kind of feel a little bit relief, but then within a short space of time you wish you hadn't left, even though I was enjoying playing, because you then go back and go, well, what if I'd been able to spend 2 or 3 more years there and been in and out of it? It quickly makes you realize what an amazing football club it is, because you miss it. And one of those reasons is because you go into a dressing room in the Championship, and it's something that annoyed me, even though we had a good set of lads, and we did relatively well for a period of time, obviously under Craig Brown. But what annoyed me was that you'd win 2 games and it was almost as if it felt all right to lose the next one. And the mentality that you acquire from 6 years at a massive club like Celtic, it was not all right to lose the next one. If you want to be a champion, you've got to win, and win again. So that kind of frustrated me, and it still frustrates me now, because and I've coached in the Championship of late, and you can kind of feel it when players go, oh yeah, we've won 2. Does the next one really matter? Whereas if you can go on 4, 5, 6, 7 games, you're going to have some kind of success in the season.
And one of the things with Preston that I did kind of want to touch on was obviously working with Craig Brown.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, Craig, so if you go back to the start of our conversation, John, the Celtic stuff started with his brother. And I'd had links with Craig when he was working as a number 2 with Scotland in 1993. When I was called up, and I think we played Switzerland, even though I wasn't involved on that day. And so Craig then took me to the World Cup in 1998 when Andy decided to go walk about Andy Gorham. So there was taking that job, or that role as a goalkeeper for Craig was a little bit about loyalty as well, because of what he'd given me in my career previously. So yeah, to be able to pay him back, and we were struggling when I first got there. We were struggling at the bottom of the table, and he signed a couple of experienced lads. We took Brian O'Neill from I think he was from Forest or Derby at the time. Took Craig Burley on loan. So there was a little bit of a Celtic link in there, which was nice. And we, like I said, I think about 2.5 years later, they were in the playoffs under Billy Davis. So playing for Craig, I enjoyed it. I had a couple of little run-ins with him, but you always have run-ins with managers when you lose football matches. And I think again that comes back down to I wanted to win every week, and so did Craig. And Craig knew how important that was. But he was a great man, and I enjoyed all my time with him. And I was obviously sad to see him go last year.
And to touch on the kind of link that you'd brought on with the Scotland and being called up there, what was it like kind of difference at international level to club level from a playing perspective?
From a
From a playing perspective, firstly.
yeah, okay. Well, I only played twice, and my first cap was against Lithuania, which was in a World Cup qualifier, and we won 3-0. And then I played in a friendly against Australia. We got beat 2-0. But again, I think I was in the squad about 30 times over a period that spanned from 98 till even through till 2003, maybe 5 or 6 years. And you always it's a privilege, isn't it, to play for your country? And I also, when you were at Celtic, and because I've been involved even of late with New Zealand football into the national team, it's kind of a relief period of time for players. They leave their environments that where there's certain pressures, and they come into this international team for 10 days and reconnect. You might meet people again that you haven't seen for a couple of years because they've gone to other clubs. And I think therefore it becomes relaxed isn't the right word, but it becomes a really open and enjoyable environment. And Craig was really good at that with those environments. And Bertie Votes worked under him as well when we got to the playoffs against Holland and had that fabulous result at home to Holland, but then couldn't quite turn it around for the next leg. But international football is a privilege, and I was delighted to have those opportunities, even though my caps were limited.
And then to kind of flip it around in the coaching side of it.
Yeah.
Was coaching always something that you had thought that you were going to get into? Was that an easy transition?
Yeah, I did my most of my licenses relatively early, both my goalkeeping and my outfield licenses. And I think when I went out to New Zealand, I was sort of as a player coach. I then became head coach for 4 years, very, 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 very quickly, and absolutely loved it. Different pressure, but I really enjoyed bringing players through, developing young ones. And at the team I was at in New Zealand, we were a provincial, so relied heavily on that aspect of development in the academy. So I got a lot of pleasure at that, but then also had ambition, but kind of realised that ambition was going to have to be as a specialist goalkeeping coach, stroke assistant, and that's when my pathway turned through the A-League, and then I think also what New Zealand gave me was opportunities that I probably wouldn't have got elsewhere. I was lucky enough to go to the Olympics in Beijing 2008. Yeah, and I've worked with the national team on and off for the last 18 years, and owe New Zealand a lot for that.
And when you're kind of doing that, so for example, with the Olympics, I mean, that's a phenomenal worldwide occasion. What's it like though not to be watching that, but to actually be involved?
Yeah, we were the first event of the 2008 Olympics. So we'd drawn China in China, obviously. We played in Beijing in front of 60,000. And we drew 1-1. And I've got to tell you this, there is a funny story to this though, right? So we'd gone through Jakarta and Indonesia as part of our preparation. And there was this Asian guy that turned up at our hotel in Indonesia, and he spoke to myself. He goes, "Oh, you had a long career in the UK. And he spoke to Stuart Jacobs, who was the head coach, and had a long conversation. He said, "Oh, do you mind if I sort of watch you work for the next 10 days?" And we were sort of, "Yep, come on in." Kiwis are really quite open like that. So this fella spent 10 days with us. And then 3 weeks later, we turned up in Beijing, and we were looking at the Chinese delegation, and he was actually one of them. So he spent 10 days, probably knew every pack drill that we had as a group, knew how we operated. And we were flummoxed by it. We were obviously just too nice, took him in, and there he was, part of the Chinese FA. But we drew 1-1, so he can't have done that well, could he?
And I'm assuming there's now a closed door policy on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Why wouldn't you open your door if people are interested? But yeah, we get security now. We didn't have security in those days.
And I suppose one of the kind of final questions is obviously with you looking throughout your career, but also, you know, obviously being about football with your dad at such a young age, and the kind of developments that there's been, you know, kind of consistently in the changes in it. Do you see it kind of moving for the better?
I hate VAR with a passion, and that's not because of the controversy. It's not because of everything that we've seen this weekend, everything that we see every weekend. I hate it because we lose the spontaneity of the game, right? And that's what I enjoyed. Like I was up until November, I was at Stoke City, and you know, in the Championship, you don't. The minute the ball goes in the back of the net and the linesman's flag doesn't go up and the referee turns around, that's a goal. And the players can enjoy it, the supporters enjoy it, the coaching staff enjoy it. And I think we've taken away one of the biggest moments in a game of football because everything is checked. I think it's diabolical what VAR has actually done to our game.
Yeah, and you know what? And I agree because the amount of games that I've been in, I'll go to games at all different levels. So I'll go to lower league games in Scotland where there's no VAR, and you know a goal's a goal, a foul's a foul, and that's the end of it. And then when you go to a ground where there's VAR, whether you're watching it or you're at the ground, you can't celebrate. Everybody's instantly looking to see every goal's checked. What's going to be checked on this now?
Even on telly, you're sitting there waiting for something else to pop up. I don't get it. I don't know why we've done it. I wish the players were strong enough to stand up and go, no, we don't want VAR, or we certainly don't want it to the extent that it's being used. If you know, let's just get rid of it. All right, because you know, like you said, you go to a non-league game. I'll go and watch Taunton against Torquay this week, and it'd just be 93 minutes of spontaneous football. That's what we're after.
And the kind of final part that just a couple of very quick questions to kind of ask is just throughout your career. So some will be quick questions in regards to your career, maybe in regards to football, or some not, not so much. So, firstly, is what was your favourite pre-match meal?
I used to like a little bit of ice cream. I used to have to hide it from the managers.
And can I ask, and sorry just to side note on this, but if you were to see that now in your capacity, would you be happy?
I wouldn't care. Look, if that's what it takes to make someone happy so they can go out and play football, who cares?
And was there a specific flavour of ice cream?
Chocolate with chips in it.
The best or one of the best players that you've ever played with?
The obvious one is Henrik, and the other one has got to be Lubo Moravcik. You know, if Zinedine Zidane thinks he's one of the best players he's ever played with, why wouldn't I? He was a magician, and to have two of them in the same team was remarkable. But Henrik. Yeah, he had everything, and what more than that, he was just wanted to be a winner, and that sort of came through into our team. So those two.
Obviously, I assume your father, in the sense of and personally, but in professional sides of it, a big influence for you in football that you worked with.
Yeah.
Who would you pick as a big influence in football?
Since I've been in coaching, Tony Pulis has been huge. I was lucky enough to work with him as a young player when he was coming into his coaching at Bristol Rovers back in the 80s, and then to get to work with someone like Tony in the Premier League for 3 years at West Brom, that was a big influence. He taught me how important it was to set a team up properly for every event.
The kind of next one. So, in regards to football, when you were a player, favorite moment or one of your favorite moments?
I think one of my favorite moments has got to be after we beat Liverpool 5-1 on my Premier League debut. My dad was the manager at Coventry, and to walk off the park at Highfield Road and give your dad a hug after a game like that takes some beating. Outside that, I would have said the first title at Celtic.
The best player that you played against?
There's too many. John. There's too many for so many different reasons. Yeah, I think Beckham was up there, and I think more I look back on his career and see those moments that he had in his locker. I think he was a top player, but I think the other one that probably stands out was Eric Cantona as well. In that great Man United team, he was something special, and he had an aura about him.
With the Euros coming up this year,
Yeah.
Firstly, how do you think Scotland will do now that we're able to say that we're there?
Well, I'd just like us to turn up to a World Cup as well as soon as possible. I think the team. I think Steve's done an incredible job. We haven't won as many games of late, but I think when it comes to the tournament, they'll be ready. And I'd like to think that we'll get through the first stages.
Do you know some actually the few people that I've had on this recently, that's been probably the biggest answer that everyone seems to have is going through the.
I think there's belief. I think there's a lot of belief in there. And we've got a good squad of players, and it won't take much for them just to click back in again.
Finally, with yourself and your capacity just now, what's the kind of future holding for you?
I can't actually tell you. I'd love to, but I can't. No, I've got a new opportunity that's opening up for me, but I'm sort of bound not to say anything. But that will sort of be apparent in June, July. But I've quite enjoyed. I left Stoke in December. Would love to have still been there with Alex Neil. Would love working with him, but it's been nice to take 5 or 6 months out and recharge. You don't often get those opportunities in football. I've been lucky enough since I finished playing at 37, and I'm sat here at nearly 56, and I haven't been out of work. Which is fantastic, and I feel very grateful for that. But yeah, I'll try and stay in as long as I can.
So, and I appreciate you not being able to say what's coming up, but you're still going to be involved. There's no career changes coming now?
No career change at this moment. No. I thought about going into farm. I had a small farm out in New Zealand, and I thought, well, sheep are a lot less, give you a lot less hassle than football players, but not quite the same adrenaline rush when you win on a Saturday afternoon.
Probably a lot less entertaining moments, though.
Yeah. But they don't have VAR either, the sheep, do they? They just have babies and die most of the
time. But look, Jonathan, it's honestly been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. Really appreciate you kind of going through the stories in your career. And look, I will definitely be looking out for what the announcement is. I'm now intrigued, so I'm going to be looking at everything.
I'll tell you when it comes when I can. I'll tell you, John. All right, I'll send you an email or I'll send you a text.
No problem. But look, all the best moving forward. And again, thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you, mate. And I'm sort of thrilled that you were there when I played as well, because there's not many left now, is there?
Well, I thought this was great until I now feel old getting off it. So thanks for that.
Nice to meet you, John.
You too. Take care, Jonathan. Thank you.